Hello everyone, this is Carl Shiflett from Infragistics, and in this short video I want to show you the control configurator for the XAM category chart. Alright, so before we dive into the configurator, let's talk a little bit about the XAM category chart and its data requirements. So I'm going to wander over here to my model folder where I've got a few types, and what we're going to see here is we've got ourselves a data item that has some double values and a string and a date. Now, at a bare minimum, in order for the category chart to render and plot some data for you, your type or your collection of your type has to have at least one numeric value and one string value. And then the chart will automatically just plot it and you'll be a happy customer. Now, by way of demonstration, I'm showing you a type that happens to have a couple doubles, a string, and a date, and you'll see why in just a minute. Now, this type also derives from this other class called item base, and it's got an ID property. So most developers probably don't want to plot their ID. So if this ID represented an ident column from a database, you probably don't want to plot that. So we at Infragistics have enabled developers to be able to tell the category chart not to plot this type, or I'm sorry, not to plot this property. So there's two ways to do it. One is you can decorate your properties with the data series member intent attribute, and then in the constructor, use this enumeration to tell it don't plot. So that's one way. Now you may not want to add attributes to your types, so we have another way you can do it in XAML, and I'll show you that. But I wanted you to be aware that this feature is here. All right, now we also, this category chart also supports if you want to have a property on your ViewModel that is a property that derives from some generic collection. In this case, I just picked observable collection by way of demonstration of T that has a data item. So you can structure your data like this if you want. Now, there's one other scenario, which is in the help file for the XAM category chart, which is the notion of a hierarchical data item. So if you have a collection of hierarchical data items, what will happen is the chart will plot your numeric values and use your string as the x-axis, and then provided that your type implements IEnumerable T, then it'll also walk down the property that's IEnumerable and it will plot all of these data items along with these properties. So essentially this would be the parent, this would be the children. Now you don't have to name your property children, right? When you implement the interface here, let me get rid of all this since it's not germane. When you implement this interface, you're going to have to provide these two methods, and here's where you can tell it the property, you point to the property that you want to use as your children. All right, so that's our data shapes. Now let's talk about the view model. So the view model would want to would expose a collection of some type, and we're going to data bind that collection to the item source of the category chart. So you could see here that I've exposed the custom data model. We also support a list of dictionary items, and for those that have the deepest requirements of list of dictionary items. Now this is probably not a typical scenario because the chart will get really busy, but this scenario is, and we've got a blog post that talks about why you would want to use this. So over here, if you go out to the Infragistics blogs, and you're going to find this blog post, Visualize JSON Data Quickly Using the XAM Category Chart. Now, what does this data look like? And why do I want to visualize JSON data? Well, first of all, here's what the data looks like. We have an array of objects, and then each object has the same properties, and of course they would have different values, right? All right, so let's say that you needed to plot data coming from some a website that returned JSON data. Well, rather than having you be required to create types and then map those types and use the JSON library to hydrate those types, Instead, you can just take the JSON data and go ahead and serialize it into a dictionary. So essentially it's just name value pairs, right? And you could see these are the names. And then down here, you could see it plotted. So that's really cool. And it didn't take much to get that going. And it even talks about adding the legend where you can see, and then how to exclude some properties here. All right. So that's a pretty cool feature, and the chart fully supports that. All right, so over here we can also have a property on our view model. Now probably you're only going to have one of these. I'm just have lots of them so I can do different demonstrations. So here's my list of hierarchical data items, and of course we do support list of list. And then here's probably the common one is here. I got a list of data item and I just want to plot them, right? All right. So let's get ourselves a category chart, and we'll just drag and drop it from the Infographics toolbox. We'll press Control-K, Control-D, or Format Document to clean up our XAML. And to open up the configurator, it's just like all the other configurators. Essentially, all we have to do is just when you click here on the tag, and then I opened it up by accident. Sorry about that. So when you click on the tag, you get the light bulb. And then which is your quick actions, and it lists all the quick actions you can do. So you can click on this, or Control Dot brings up your quick actions list, and then you can select the one you want, and then you can just press enter, and it comes right up. All right, so our XAM category chart configurator is just like the XAM data grid configurator and the XAM pie chart configurator in that we can't show any UI until there's some data there, right? Because without data, the chart is empty. So what we're going to do is we have this red property, and it tells you have to set this. So you come over here and you click on the property marker, just like in Visual Studio, and it's going to open up our data binding builder here. Now, we were in the waterfall view XAML file, and since my project included a waterfall view model, by convention, the tool just went and selected this view model because it assumes that this is what you want. All right, so let's say that it couldn't find it by convention, or you really don't want to use that view model because you got a different view model you want to use. Then there's going to be a list of view models you can pick from, or you can just come into your project and you can drill into your namespace. Aha, got it. And then I could come down here, and there it is, waterfall view model. So for now, we're just going to use this view model, and we'll go back. All right, let's start at the top. Custom view model. Here we go. Let's create a data binding. All right, so we created this data binding, and the configurator goes out. It looks at your data shape and all your property names that you have, that you've selected on your types, and it builds out some sample data. So now we can see these two series that got plotted, and if you want to know which one's which, then you can come over here to the legend, and you can just click add legend, and we can see that final value and initial value are both plotted. All right, well, that makes sense. That's exactly what we wanted to have plotted. All right, now, so remember I was telling you about excluding properties, right? Well, in addition to that other way that I showed you, which is with decorating, if you didn't, you can also come over here and you could pick it here. So I'm going to exclude final value, and you can see it goes away, right? All right, so let me turn off this legend for a second, and I'm just going to hit apply and save, Control-K, Control-D. And what I want you to see here is we got excluded properties, and it's got the name here. Now, the reason that there's a star here is because sometimes customers, that's you or me, we would have a complex set of data that we want to plot, and it's got nested classes and collections and so forth. And so in this case, in order so that the chart will find all the instances of final value, no matter where they are in the hierarchy of data, by putting a star, it grabs them all and excludes them all. And so this is a pretty cool feature that you can turn data on and off. Now, to show you that this actually works correctly, let's just, by way of demonstration real fast, let's come over here, and I'm going to comment this attribute out, and I'm just going to go ahead and build my category spike again. All right, so my build is done. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and you should see 2 series plotted. Aha! Now we're already excluding our final value, but if we add our legend in, we could see that the ID has snuck in there. So if you didn't want to use the attribute, you can also come over here and you could select it this way, and now it's only showing that, and that's pretty cool. Now, another great use of this excluded properties feature is, let's say that you had an application that was plotting like maybe, I don't know, 5 or 10 series or something, right? And so your application could have lots of data, and you want to give your users at runtime on the device or on a tablet, you want to give them the ability to turn off a series. So you could have yourself a little combo box that went and did the same thing that we're doing here and just turn it off. And so this way, and you could even do it with radio buttons or checkboxes or whatever. So now you could see it's real easy to turn data on and off. And that's a really cool feature. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reset this, set it back to its value or its default value. And now I'm going to talk about excluded or included properties. So again, you can see we've got all 3 now. Included properties works a little bit different. It only includes the properties that you state once you start adding them. So let's say all I wanted to show was the name and the initial value. And you can see that's exactly the only thing that shows up. And that's really, really nice, right? Okay, so we also have a properties. I'm going to go and reset this here so you can see. All right, so now let's go back and turn on final value, initial value, and then and those are the ones we want. And the name is automatically going to get picked up because it picks up the first string. Now, the other thing you can do by way of these collection of properties, and you can see that down here, that's going to be your name, is you could come down here to the x-axis label, and now you could select which property is going to represent your x-axis. So in this case, I want to use post date because I want to show a date down here, and then immediately it changes, and that is really nice, right? Of course, you could go back to name if you wanted, and even if you wanted to, plot an ID, yeah, you wanted to use that, you could do that. You're allowed to do whatever you want. So that's really cool. Now, when this thing serializes out, and I'll just turn off this legend here, because right now we're plotting. Let's see here. What are we actually plotting here? So we're plotting the final value and the initial value. Those are turned off. And so what I want to do is I want to turn back on initial value. So now we're plotting that, and I'm going to exclude ID. Okay, so now the thing we're plotting is the initial value, and we can see that from the legend. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save this and press Control K, Control D, and you can see now there's a little bit of difference here. So this is an x-axis label, post date, and you don't need a star here because we're just going to use the name. And you can see here that if you have multiple properties, all you're going to do is just separate them by a space. You don't have to put a comma in there. And then you can, and that's how you set that property. So let's go ahead and start this back up again. And now we can see that our chart is plotting something really nice. Okay, let's come down to, well, not come down to, let's start taking a look at some different charts. And so it'd be nice to see a little bit more data. So I'm going to just go ahead and show that. So I've got my 2 items here. Let's put the legend in, and now we can see those are our plotted values. So I come over here to select, well, I can change my chart types, right? So you got area, and you got a columnar chart, and like a line chart. So that's, that's actually pretty neat, right? All right, so you could pick any of the kind of charts you want. You could change your brushes. So in this case, the brushes would represent what's being, the brushes used to plot these lines and the markers. And so you can come over here and you can just like pick a different one. So now we got 2 ones that are both green, or you can pick whatever you want, right? I'm just going to reset that. And then marker brushes, you can pick the brush that's going to be used to fill in. So the marker brush actually paints inside. So you can see how we've painted inside these with those brushes. And then the outlines, of course, would paint on the outlines. By default, the markers have a transparent center. All right, so what's a trend line? Well, over here, if we just scroll down inside our property grid, we're going to find our trend lines right here. So we have a trend line type, and by default, we've got none. So let's go pick one. The one I like is this cubic fit. And so you can see that we've got some nice trend lines. Now you can adjust the the thickness of the trend line if you wanted to. It all depends on your application. And of course, you could change the brush that's used to render your trend line, and that's completely up to you, right? Okay, we'll put this back to default and just go ahead and reset these and restore that back so we don't have anything there. All right, so let's take a look at some different data, right? So I'm going to come down to, or I'm going to go up to my item source, and I'm going to pick a different data. I'm going to get this list of dictionary items. I'm going to create my binding. All right, so now when this happens, several things happen. First of all, the excluded and included properties, anytime you change the item source, it's going to reset that. The other thing it does is it resets the label. Okay, so because it's a set of dictionary properties, then these fields here wouldn't be filled in for the configurator, because the configurator has no idea what the actual property names are going to be in your runtime dictionary collection. So that's why they're not there. It's not a bug. They're just doing their best to push the data out. And you can see here that these are my values, and everything gets plotted correctly. All right, so that's pretty interesting. All right, let's take a look here at the hierarchical list of data items, which is this one here. So a list of hierarchical data items. I'm going to pick that one. And it goes and it's going to go and plot this. Now, it's kind of hard to see the differences, right? Because they're all, I mean, it's very difficult to understand this chart, for me at least. So the way that the one that the hierarchical data looks really good in is when you have a waterfall chart. And the reason is because right here it's plotting each of the items, and then it's plotting their children one after another as it goes across. If you want to lessen the amount of data that's going to be seen, you can change this to 2 data items, and now it'll go and create one where you've got it's just got we're only getting 2 of the items, and then we're getting, of the appropriate collection. And all it's doing is just dynamically generating this data for you. So now let's go take a look at another one. Create data down here, a list of data items. So here, we're going to pick this one, create the binding. All right, so and now we have a completely different list, and our data goes across. Now, I'm going to switch to a column chart, and we can see here that we've got our series here, and we've only got 2 items, so I'm going to increase this back to 5. So I'm showing these 5 items. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 5 items, they each have these particular values, which is ID initial value. Now, like before, let's just go ahead and get rid of the ID value, and now we just got our 2 values here. Okay, so there's some really cool things that you can do with the chart. Over here, let's enable animation. So once you've turned animation on, anytime that you reload your data, it'll run the animation again. So you get some really nice options here with your animation. So in this case, we've got a transition in duration and a transition in mode. So if you want to like sweep from, or accordion from the left, and just reload your data, then the chart accordions in, and there's a whole bunch of these, and you can use the configurator to actually see what's going to happen at design time, so that when you save it, your users will have something really cool. All right, now let's say that you also wanted to add some markers. So what's a marker again? So the marker are these little points that actually, that's where the data value gets plotted, right? Well, we were back over here in a columnar chart and doesn't have markers. That's because the top is the marker, right? So, but you can, if you want to, you can come over here and you can pick markers. So if you go automatic, then the chart will pick some markers for you and automatically. But if you don't want it to do it that way, then you could do, say, diamond, hexagon, oops, where was that? Diamond and hexagon and hexagram. And now you can see how it's went and picked those. So that's pretty cool. All right, so the last thing I'd like to show you with this is for the column chart and the waterfall chart, these 2 properties, x-axis gap and x-axis overlap, are enabled. So if I switch over to like a line chart, then you can see that these two properties are grayed out, right? So they're disabled now because they don't have any effect. All right, so let's go back to a column chart. So what does the gap do? Well, here, let's watch it. See how what it does is it's how much room that it's going to give each of those items. And it's a value from 0 to 1, and then you could set this. So if your chart gets really busy, you can come over here and you could set this so that the chart is not as busy, and you can adjust these widths. The other thing is the overlap. So watch what happens with the overlap. So as the number gets bigger, it gives them more room, right? And so maybe that's something you need. And that's why the creators of the tool created that. All right, so I'll leave the rest of these properties up to the developers to go and look at, and put in your titles and tick marks. You've got interval, your stroke thickness. So interval is kind of cool. Where, oops, I'll show you this one here. If I change it to 2, then what it does, it only puts labels at every other one. And if I change it to 1, then it forces them to show at every one. And then when it's set at its 0 value, then it's automatic, and it'll just do it based on the amount of room that's there. And then it'll leave off labels as required. All right, so this is the XAM category chart control configurator. I hope this will help you out a lot. Yeah, the only other thing I should probably cover is this low value. So most of the configurators, when you change the data, the sample data values, they immediately recalculate. But with the chart, there's a lot going on. So the way we set it up is I figured that you would set each of the properties the way you want, and then you just hit reload. So in this case, because I have a minus 500, look how neat that is, right? And so that's why that's the way it is there. Now, the only other thing I could see is these negative brushes and negative outlines. So you can see that they're grayed out here. The reason is they're only active for the waterfall chart. So in the waterfall chart, anytime a value goes from a higher value and it descends down, it goes down, then what happens is it paints it red, or it uses the brushes that are in this palette here. In this case, I'm just using the defaults. And the way you know that these are actually going down is you can put a marker out there if you want. I'll show you. So let's just put an automatic marker. And so you can see where the marker, see how it's plotted at the bottom, and then the ones that are positive values, they're plotted at the top. Okay, well, I hope you really enjoy this configurator, and you use it a lot in your applications, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.